You know that feeling, right? That constant, low grade hum of stress that just seems to be the soundtrack of modern life. It's not one big crisis, it's something quieter, something that's just always there. Well, today, we're going to get to the bottom of what that really is.
So, does this sound familiar to you? You're constantly moving, you're replying to texts, you're clicking through emails, but at the end of the day, you're just completely exhausted, and you don't even have a real sense of accomplishment. It's this strange, universal feeling that we all seem to share, but we hardly ever talk about why.
And here it is. This is the core idea we're exploring today. We are not stressed out because our lives are fundamentally harder than, say, our grandparents were. Nope. We're stressed because our lives are infinitely noisier. They're just filled with this mental static our brains were never, ever designed to handle.
So let's dive into this. Let's talk about this silent epidemic. And I'm not talking about those big, life-altering, stressful events. This is about a fundamental shift in the very nature of stress itself. It's like stress went from being a rare thunderstorm to a constant, drizzling rain that just never stops. This comparison here, it just lays it out perfectly. You see, in the past, stress was episodic. A battle, a tough winter. It was intense, for sure, but it was finite. It ended. There was time to recover. But modern stress, that's a whole different beast. It's a continuous, ambient hum in the background that literally never switches off. It keeps our brains in this state of perpetual low-grade alert.
Okay, so if it's not the big dramatic events causing this constant hum, then what is? Well, it turns out there's a name for this unseen enemy, and honestly, naming it is the key to understanding everything. We're talking about the micro-decision. Let's be really clear about what these are. Micro-decisions are all those tiny, constant choices that just chip away at our mental energy. Which email should I open first? Should I check that notification? Do I click this link or ignore it? Each one demands our attention, but here's the thing. They give us absolutely no sense of meaning or purpose back. They are the unseen currency we are spending all day long without even realizing we're going mentally broke.
And these 4 points really break down why these little decisions are so sneaky. First, they happen all the time. We're talking hundreds of times a day. Second, on their own, each one seems totally harmless. But third, and this is the big one, when you add them all up, the cumulative impact is massive. And finally, and this is so important, they are often forced on us by the very design of our apps, our workplaces, and our entire digital world.
So why? Why are these tiny choices so draining? Well, it all comes down to some fascinating neuroscience explained beautifully by Daniel Kahneman. Basically, our brain has 2 modes. There's System 1, which is fast, automatic, and cheap to run. Think of it like your brain on autopilot. And then there's System 2. That's the slow, deliberate, and really energy-hungry part of your brain. Every single micro-decision forces us to fire up that expensive System 2.
And here's the kicker. That effortful System 2 was never, ever meant to be running all day long. It's like the turbo boost for your brain. When we force it to stay always on, to deal with this endless stream of trivial choices, we are essentially redlining our mental engine. And that leads directly to cognitive burnout.
And, this isn't just a problem for overworked professionals trying to get ahead. This epidemic of microdecisions, it takes a toll on absolutely everyone. But it hits the most vulnerable among us the hardest. Let's take a look at who's really paying the price here.
Let's start with kids. Their brains are still developing, and when we flood them with endless choices on apps and screens, it's not empowering. It is completely overwhelming. All that freedom without any structure doesn't build their confidence. It actually creates decision overload, which can lead to anxiety and make it harder for them to learn.
And then there are working adults, and I'm guessing a lot of us can relate to this. We're trapped in what you could call productivity theater. We're constantly switching contexts, from email to Slack to a Zoom call, back to a document, and every single switch is another microdecision. We end up confusing all this exhausting activity with meaningful effort. But really, we're just burning through our cognitive fuel with very little to show for it.
And finally, let's talk about our elders. Technology that is supposed to help, things like online banking or healthcare portals, often does the exact opposite. Constantly changing interfaces, unclear instructions, it all forces them into a barrage of microdecisions. And this doesn't just create stress, it actively erodes their confidence and their autonomy. So, this brings us to a really uncomfortable but absolutely necessary question. If the very systems we've built are making our kids anxious and making our elders feel incompetent, are we really sure this is what progress is supposed to look like?
Which leads us to maybe the most liberating and important idea in this entire discussion. That feeling of being exhausted and overwhelmed, it is not your fault. Let me say that again. It is not a personal weakness. It is a fundamental failure of design.
Think about that. We have built a world that pushes us past our natural neurological limits, and then we have the nerve to blame ourselves for not being able to keep up. We're treating the biological reality of cognitive exhaustion as if it's some kind of character flaw.
The crucial thing to get here is that willpower isn't some magical, infinite resource you either have or you don't. It is a biological function that gets depleted, just like a muscle gets tired. You know that feeling when you procrastinate at the end of the day, or maybe snap at a left one? That isn't a lack of discipline, it's neurological exhaustion. Your brain is simply out of fuel.
Okay, so if the problem is bad design, then the solution has to be better design. So let's talk about the counteroffensive. How do we actually fight back against this constant drain on our mental energy? The guiding principle for this whole fight is beautifully simple, and it's non-negotiable. The goal is not to have more discipline or more willpower or some magical new time management hack. The goal is to make fewer meaningless decisions in the first place. And the cool thing is, this can happen at every single level. As individuals, we can standardize our routines, like picking out clothes the night before. At home, we can create predictable rhythms to cut down on all those what's for dinner negotiations. In our workplaces, we need what's called decision hygiene. Fewer meetings, clear defaults. And as a society, we have to start demanding simpler, more human-centered systems. Now, this might all sound great in theory, but what does it actually look like in practice, in the real world? Well, let's look at a fantastic case study, an organization called the Meda Foundation that is putting these very principles into action. So Meda doesn't just help individuals, they redesign entire ecosystems to be stress resilient. They use structured education to reduce decision fatigue. They create jobs that actually align with people's strengths. And here's their key insight. It's brilliant. By designing systems that are clear enough for autistic individuals to thrive in, they end up making those systems better and less stressful for everyone. And this is where it comes back to us. Understanding this problem is that crucial first step. But for those of you who want to take action, supporting organizations like the Meda Foundation is a really direct way to help redesign these broken systems. It's about building a world where people can actually flourish, not just survive. Let's end on this really powerful idea. For so long, we've been told that resilience means being tough, enduring hardship. But what if real resilience isn't about how much you can endure inside a broken system? What if it's about having the courage to redesign those systems so that superhuman endurance is no longer required in the first place?